Thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode, and now I'd like to turn the call over to Ms. Christine Beauregard. Ma'am, you may begin.
Thank you very much, and good morning, and thank you all for joining us for our Conducting Effective Self-Inspections webinar, which, when you think about it, is really one of the most important aspects of any successful security program. But before we jump into our webinar, let's get some of our administrative housekeeping out of the way, and we'll start with some introductions. For those of you I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, I am Christine Beauregard, the Industrial Security Curriculum Manager here at CDSE, and your host for today's webinar. I'm also going to be leading you through several poll and chat questions and some of the PEs that we've put together for this webinar today. With me in our webinar studio in Linthicum, Maryland is our presenter, Renee King. You can see our pictures on your screen there. She's one of our industrial security instructors here at CDSE, and we'll learn a little bit about her in a minute. And we also have our producer, Rachel Mojo. Rachel's not only going to be working behind the scenes to make sure we stay on track and on time, but she's also going to provide a few basic instructions on the webinar tools you will need to maximize your webinar experience today. So Rachel?
Thank you, Chris. Hi there. I will show you a few tools that will help you today. First of all, if you look on the left-hand corner of your screen, you're going to find a file share box. There are 3 documents in that file share box that are important to today's presentation. One of them is the practical exercise document. It looks like this. Please download it and print it out. It will help you participate a little bit later on in our webinar. And there's the file share box on the screen. Next, there is a closed captioner with us today, taking note of our spoken words. Thank you very much to the closed captioner. There is a notes and announcements box for you, also a question and answer box. If you have any questions, please enter them in the box. If we cannot get to your question today, we will publish answers on the CDSE website. You can see we will have a few poll questions today and a few chat questions. Please respond. For a poll question, simply select a radio button. For a chat question, enter responses into the chat box. We'll have a good conversation going that way. That about does it for my navigation orientation to the screen. I'm going to pass it back over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Rachel. As I mentioned, our presenter today is Renee King, who's not only one of our CDSE industrial security instructors, she is the only industrial security instructor dedicated to training our external customers, basically all of industry and all of our government security specialists with industrial security responsibilities. Renee is also the course manager for both our FSO curriculums, which meet the NISP FSO training requirements, and she's also the course manager for the Getting Started for New FSOs seminar, which is our only instructor-led course for industry. Our goal today is to help you conduct a more effective self-inspection. You have to do a self-inspection. So doesn't it make sense to make the most out of the time and effort you're going to spend doing it? And that's what we hope to do today. To help us meet this goal, it's my pleasure to introduce my partner in crime and our presenter this morning, Renee King. Renee?
Good morning, everyone. As Chris said, I welcome each of you to our webinar this morning. Thank you for joining us. So let's get to it. Why do a self-inspection? NISP paragraph 1-207A, which is not shown, requires that a periodic security review of all clear contractor facilities will be conducted to ensure that safeguards employed by contractors are adequate for the protection of classified information. Now, while the NISP has a requirement for the government, there is also a requirement for the contractor facilities. In paragraph 1-207B, the NISP further states that contractors shall review their security system on a continual basis and shall also conduct a formal self-inspection that are at intervals consistent with risk management principles. So now that you know why a self-inspection is done, because it's required by the NISP, why should you really do a self-inspection? Chris, let's give them our first chat question.
Okay, here's your first chance to get involved today. Our first question, I want you to write down in the chat box on your screen the answer to the question, why do you really do a self-inspection? self-inspection? Not because you have to, but what's the benefit? What's in it for you, I guess, is a good way to think of it. I'll give you a couple minutes to go ahead and write in your answer. Why do you really do a self-inspection? Okay, for compliance, correct vulnerabilities, validation, I like that. So you know where you're at. Very good. We have a lot of good answers coming on. Make sure that you remain compliant.
They're coming in hot.
They are coming in hot and heavy. Thanks, everyone, for playing with us. Okay. I see a lot of good answers. I'm going to turn it over to Renee to kind of lead us through.
Okay, Chris. So why do you really do those self-inspections? For one, to ensure compliance with applicable NISP requirements. 2, to ensure compliance with DD 441 contractor requirements. Also, to validate your established security procedures. You can have the best security procedures in the world, but if you don't test them, how do you know they are working as intended? And finally, CYA, cover your assets so that you don't have any surprises when DSS comes out to do your security vulnerability assessment or your SVA. So now that you know why you need to do a good self-inspection, I want you to think about when you should do your self-inspection. Chris, take it away.
Okay, for our second chat question, write your answer to the question, when should you conduct your self-inspection, in the chat box on the screen. There are more than one reason, or I guess one time, when you want to do your self-inspection, so think about that. Okay, I see annually, semi-annually, quarterly, at least once a year, every 6 months. Oh my goodness, they're coming in. Thanks again. Continuously, okay, I think the NISP even says that. Very good, a lot of good ideas in there. A lot of people know when to do their self-inspections. Renee?
Okay, remember the NISP tells us that we should conduct our self-inspection at intervals consistent with risk management principles, which we generally suggest conducting at midway between your scheduled DSS SVAs. But there are other times that you want to consider doing a self-inspection, such as when your company receives a new classified program that contains new security requirements. When you became that new FSO or a new FSO is appointed at your company will be a good time to do a self-inspection. By conducting a self-inspection, you will have a pretty good idea what is happening and what is the overall security posture of your industrial security program. When you are experiencing problems with any of your established security procedures, this is a good time to find out what went wrong. It could be you need to modify a procedure, or it could be an isolated problem that simply requires some additional security training. When your company experiences change conditions, another good idea to take a look at your security program. Remember, change conditions are not isolated occurrences. They can affect many other aspects of your security program. And don't forget your requirement to review your security program on a continual basis, and there may be many reasons why you might want to conduct a self-inspection outside of that midway between your government SVA's window. Think about your self-inspection as an ongoing program. Next. When NISP Change 2 came out last year, it updated some of our self-inspection requirements. According to NISP Change 2, the FSO must now prepare a formal report describing the self-inspection, its findings, and some resolutions to any issues found. This report must be retained for CSA review through your next SVA. It is also now required that one of your senior management officials certifies to the CSA in writing on an annual basis that a self-inspection has been conducted, that senior management has been briefed on the results, that appropriate corrective action has been taken, and that management fully supports your security program. So not only do you have to retain a formal report for DSS to review at your next SVA, but one of your senior managers must certify in writing on an annual basis that a self-inspection was done, corrective actions has been taken, and that your senior management was briefed on the results and supports your security program. So you've done your self-inspection and completed your formal report. How do you think you will submit this senior management annual certification to DSS? Rachel, can you bring up our first poll question? And Chris, can you let them know what they need to do?
Sure. For the first poll question that you see on your screen, just choose what you believe to be is the correct answer to the question, how will you submit the Senior Management Annual Certification to DSS? Okay, just select one of the radio buttons there, and it looks like the big leader so far is EFCL. We have one ISD, a couple with an email to your IS rep, and then a few that want to maintain a copy for review during the SVA. Okay, let's let a few more of these come in. Okay, it looks like the overall winner, Renee, is EFCL. What do you think?
Okay, so how will you submit your Senior Management Annual Certification? Well, effective 1 January 2017, contractors must complete the certification in the Electronic Facility Clearance, EFCL system. So the correct answer, Chris, is B, EFCL. So all of you who had EFCL, pat yourselves on the back. And remember, DSS will be tracking compliance, so you want to make sure you are submitting your Senior Management Certification annually via EFCL. Next. Our Self-Inspection Handbook was revised in May 2016 to be consistent with NISP Change 2 and includes insider threat requirements, which are now Element Y. This handbook should be used as your guide. It is not intended to be a checklist where you go through and just answer yes or no to all of the questions asked. If that is how you have been doing your self-inspection, we hope to change that today. We have tried to make the handbook more interactive by adding validation fields and more links to take you straight to the information discussed in that section. We have also added resources to assist you. This handbook addresses basic NISP requirements through a series of questions arranged according to 25 elements of inspection. Please keep in mind that not all 25 elements will apply to every cleared company. There are, however, 7 elements that do pertain to all cleared companies, and we will take a look at those in just a moment. But even though all 7 elements apply to all cleared companies, you don't have to answer every question under each element. You only have to answer those questions that apply to your established security procedures. And of the other 18 elements, only have to be covered if they relate to your security program. And remember, not all of the questions within each element will apply. Follow the guidance in the handbook on how to conduct your self-inspection. Think of your self-inspection as a process rather than an event, and mimic the 3-step process your IS rep follows when conducting your SVA. Step 1 is pre-inspection. This is where you will prepare your inspection by reviewing documentation, setting a date, getting management support, reviewing the handbook, and planning those interview questions. Step 2 is when you conduct your self-inspection. Use the handbook as your guide and validate your established procedures. And finally, Step 3, post-inspection will be your last step. Here you will do your corrective actions, provide feedback to your senior management and employees, letting them know how the overall self-inspection went, and you're going to finish your final report for your IS rep to review. You will find that reviewing records and interacting with employees will be where you spend most of your time doing your self-inspection. And the majority of that time will be spent talking or interviewing your employees. Because of that, the handbook has a great section on interviewing, which is on page 437, that you will want to take a look at and even include some of those interview techniques and suggested questions. Now let's take a look at those 7 elements I mentioned earlier. These are the 7 elements that are common to all clear companies and should be a part of every self-inspection. Element A, facility clearance. Element B, access authorization. Element C, security education. Element G, classified visits. Element I, classification. Element K, foreign ownership, control, or influence, foci. And element Y, insider threat. Remember that even though you would have to include all 7 elements in your self-inspection, you don't have to answer every question under each element. So now that you're familiar with the NISP requirements and the Self-Inspection Handbook, let's see if you can practice the process you will go through when conducting your own self-inspection. And if you've printed out that practical exercise, have it out and ready. Chris, why don't you tell the audience about our scenario?
Okay, for this scenario, for this practical exercise, I want you to meet Bob Miller. He's the FSO of our fictitious company we're going to be playing in today. And you can see that Bob is really happy and excited to be preparing for his first self-inspection. During his pre-self-inspection research, or that step one of the process Renee talked about, Mr. Miller confirmed that his company is cleared secret and they have secret storage. They have 2 approved storage containers to store classified material, 1 closed area for the production and testing of, and several authorized or approved or accredited computer systems for classified processing. Next slide. Mr. Miller also confirmed that his company has 1 Air Force classified contract to develop and produce an advanced satellite widget. And although the technology itself is unclassified, the application is classified up to the secret level. Additionally, certain hardware components of this advanced widget, as well as the testing parameters, are classified secret. And finally, Mr. Miller has heard through the grapevine that his company is in the process of being sold to another company, which is new information to him. Okay, next slide. So let's start out our PE by thinking about, now that you know a little bit about what he found out, Mr. Miller found out in his pre-inspection research, who do you think he should interview during his self-inspection? Okay, so I think we have 1 classified program. Looks like we have some classified processing. We have testing and production going on.
CEO?
Yeah, all kinds of things that we have a potential sale of our company. So we have senior management, PMs, contracts, program managers,
engineers,
test
good
technicians, good. Engineers, Renee said. All right, good. I think you guys have a pretty good list here. Renee, what do you think?
Oh, Chris, so based on the classified contract described in our scenario, some of the people Mr. Miller might think about interviewing may include engineers, production crew, testers, marketing, system users, custodians of those security containers, KMPs, and some administrative personnel. So you guys hit on quite a few of these great work. But this is not an all-inclusive list, so you will definitely be reaching out to other individuals. So now that you know who Mr. Miller may want to interview, let's see if we can think about the actual questions he should ask. To keep it a little more focused for our PE, let's concentrate on interviewing just the engineers working on the Air Force contract. Think about the types of activities engineers might be performing under this contract, and then the questions Mr. Miller might want to ask.
Okay, so for the second part of our PE, remember we're focusing on our engineers here. What are some of the questions you think Mr. Miller might want to ask these engineers working on a classified program for the Air Force? Okay, how do you store classified? What security requirements are in place? Do we store it in a GSA-approved container? The level of clearance, why you're cleared. Have you seen a class guide? I like that. Document control.
Do you have a storage plan? That's one.
Do you have a storage plan is a good one? Yeah, I see a lot of good thinkers out there. How to store and handle. Do you ever visit the customer? I like that. Access controls, very good. Renee, help us out.
Okay. So since the engineers are probably involved in working directly with the classified information, you might want to make sure to include questions about generating or derivatively classifying material, safeguarding that classified information, where they work on that classified, accessing the containers and combination, reporting to include the insider threat and adverse information, classified computer use, transmission, reproduction, and destruction of that classified information. Also questions about security briefings, just to name a few of the areas that you want to cover in your interviews. Mr. Miller should also remember to ask those open-ended questions and to ask follow-on questions when appropriate. Next, let's think about the Self-Inspection Handbook elements Bob or Mr. Miller will need to cover during his self-inspection.
Okay, on our screen, you should see the 18 elements not common to all cleared companies. These are the elements that will only be covered if they pertain to the security procedures in place at your company, and in this case, at Mr. Miller's company. The first element that you see is element D, consultants, and the last element is element X, special access programs. If you don't see them all in that one screenshot, there is a scroll bar on the side that you can use to access all of those. So I want you to go ahead and select all of the elements you think Mr. Miller will need to cover based on that self-inspection scenario we're following. And you can select more than one in this exercise. So select those based on what we know about the classified activities at Mr. Miller's company that we want to include in our self-inspection. Okay, we have a lot going on. Standard SPP, very good. Classified meetings seems to be a big winner. Classified storage, absolutely. Information systems, yep. Classified material controls. Let me scroll down and see the bottom here. Okay. Information systems disposition, a little bit of everything it looks like Mr. Miller might have in front of him. So Renee, help us out.
All right, Chris. Besides those 7 common elements for all clear companies, Mr. Miller might consider also covering element M, classified storage, element N, controlled access areas, element O, markings, element P, transmission, element Q, classified material controls, element R, reproduction, element S, disposition, and element T, information systems. Looks like Mr. Miller has a lot of work ahead of him. Next slide. So now that we know who Mr. Miller wants to interview, what types of questions he needs to ask, and which elements he may want to cover, the final task we need our FSO to do is to validate the information he now knows. In his pre-self-inspection research, Mr. Miller heard that his company was being sold. So when we get to the question under element A, covering changed conditions, specifically changes in ownership that could affect our facility clearance, Mr. Miller answered yes. But is he not done yet? Mr. Miller will need to take it a step further and validate that the information he believes to be true is actually true. And how does he do that? By reviewing records and interviewing our employees. Remember I told you that will be the bulk of your time. Chris, please give us our final PE for today.
Okay, Renee, this is actually a 2-part PE. The first part, we need you to provide the records you think Mr. Miller should review to validate the pending ownership change at his company. So in the bottom of the box that you see on your slide, go ahead and start typing right in there, and we'll see what you can come up with. Okay, foci. Records, 328 meeting minutes, very good. Board meeting notes, I like that. Articles of incorporation, so corporate records, KMP list, shareholders, 328, SEC filings, another good choice there. All the corporate records I see, 441, 328, public notices, really good. You guys are doing excellent. Renee?
Yeah, they hit on a lot. So Mr. Miller might also think about reviewing those board minutes. I think I saw that. Corporate records, SEC filings, marking materials, company web page. So he has some documents to review. Chris, how about that second part of the PE?
Okay, the second part that we need you to think about, you know what records to review. Who do you think you might want to interview to find out about that pending ownership change, or if that information is correct? Okay, our CEO or KMPs, very good. President, board members, a lot of presidents, owners of the company, I like that. HR director, very good. I like where we're going. Upper management, Renee?
Okay, people who might be able to verify that pending sale might include the KMPs, legal counsel, program managers, director of marketing, also the contract department. So you all did a great job on these scenario questions and helping Mr. Miller effectively complete his first self-inspection. Hopefully, by going through these practical exercises, you have a better understanding of how you can effectively conduct your next self-inspection. And it really isn't that complicated if you break it down into the steps we did today. Simply take the information you believe to be true and validate it by reviewing records and interviewing the people or the employees involved in your classified programs. Next slide. And to make it more convenient for you, we have all of the CDSE resources available on the Self-Inspections Assessment page of the FSO Toolkit. Thank you all for your attention and participation today. I hope that your next self-inspection will be your very best one ever. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks, Renee. I hope you all not only have a better understanding of what you need to do, but that you are now familiar with the tools and techniques to use in conducting effective self-inspections. Remember, approach your self-inspection as a three-step process rather than an event, and take the time to validate the information you believe to be true about your security program. And remember, you do that by interview and by reviewing documentation. That looks like that's about all the time we have for this morning. If you have questions that we didn't answer, please ask it in the question and answer pod that you see on the right of your screen. We'll collect all the questions and post the answers to our archive webinar page in the very near future. And before we end this webinar, there's one last activity I'd like you to help us out with, and that is our survey. You should see a survey appear on your screen, and once you do, just follow the prompts and answer the questions before you log out today. It should only take a few minutes as it's very brief, but the information you provide is really invaluable. So go ahead and do that. And again, we'd like to thank Renee again and Rachel for helping us out, and a special thanks to Mr. Miller for letting us take part in his first ever self-inspection. And lastly, I'd like to thank all of you. So we really do appreciate you taking the time to participate in these webinars. They're really a good training experience, and the feedback you provide only helps to make those better. Once you're done your survey, you're free to go. Thank you again. And as spring approaches us very shortly here, we all hope, remember to take time to smell the flowers and to spend time with those that you love. And that about does it for today. Thank you again, and never miss an opportunity to learn at lunch, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
This concludes today's call. Thank you for your participation. You may disconnect at this time. Speakers, please stand by.